great. This election will all come down to the electoral vote.
Well, hello, my name is Evie Martin. I'm the lead pastor here at Platte Woods Church. It's good to be gathered together here in this space. Also, I welcome those of you worshiping with us online this morning. Does anyone recognize this? Do we know what this is? Okay, all right. What about this one? It's a half rest. Thank you, son. Those music lessons are paying off. That's great. That's great. What about this one? It's an eighth rest. You got your hand raised in the back. Yeah, what is it? An eighth rest. Excellent. Good. All of these are symbols of rest. They occur in every kind of written music for any instrument or voice that you can imagine. So musicians in the room, now we know who you are, and we'll be calling you to contribute to our music ministry. What do they sound like? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They represent a complete stop for a specified period of time. My son, Laz, started voice lessons recently, and earlier this week we were practicing his new song, Ed the Invisible Dragon. I played the piano and he started singing his part, but very quickly we were all out of sync. His notes didn't match my chords, his rhythm wasn't lining up with what I was playing. I stopped and I said, whoa, wait a minute, what's happening? And we looked at his part together and he was so excited to sing all of the notes in his melody that he simply blazed right on through the rest. He didn't stop where the music said it made sense to stop, and the result was chaos and cacophony. The resting, the stopping, the pauses, the silence are just as essential to the songs as the sounds are. As creatures who are created to be singers in the song of life, why do we think we're any different? Our songs are meant to have sound and pause, notes and rests. And when we skip the rests, our lives too become noisy and chaotic. They do not sound the way they are meant to. In this new year, we have taken up the resolution of rest here at Platte Woods Church. First, reclaiming rest as God's first gift to us. At the dawn of creation in Genesis 2, God worked 6 days and then rested on the seventh. And God then gave that day of rest to us. So this new year is our chance to receive that gift well and not neglect or return this blessing. And then last week, we talked about rest as justice. It is not just given, but it is commanded by God as one of the 10 commandments, and it is intended for all people. When we deny rest to others, we upset the balance of God's desire for the world. We are breaking God's command. And today, we'll look at the power rest offers us to push back against the systems that have shaped us and now seem to have us all running at a breakneck speed, with the CDC classifying sleep deprivation cited as a public health epidemic. Today, we will see rest as resistance. Unless you were born before the start of the Industrial Revolution, I don't see anyone in here that would fit that category. Every person in this room is a product of a world that is driven by profit and productivity. Not one of us has ever known the world to be any other way. And when profit and productivity are the ultimate goal, people are no longer people. We are means to an end. We are machines. Our worth is measured in money, based on what and how much and how valuable of a thing or service we can produce. And the more time that can be spent producing, the more money comes out at the top. When they say time equals money, they are right. And yet somehow most of us usually get the short end of the stick with both. But this is the world that has been created, not the world as it has to be. And we do not have to let it have all our time. Maybe the way I'm saying that sounds a little harsh, a little extreme, and maybe not everyone experiences the height of industry and capitalism as invasive to their personal lives, but these are still systems that have shaped our understanding of ourselves. And they are systems that do not have a pause button. There are cultural norms and values that condition us to believe, consciously or unconsciously, that if we are not doing something, if we are not in motion, we are failing. We are less than. We are not valuable to the world. We are human beings, but we are indelibly stamped by a world that never shuts off, and we live life as if we are human doings. This may be how the world is now. It wasn't always this way, and it is not how we are designed to be. And so, to rest, to stop, to exit the hamster wheel then becomes an act of resistance. A moment of rest, an hour, a day becomes an insistence that the world cannot have all of you that it wants to take. To slow down is to resist the speed of the world. The absolute perfect metaphor for this reality literally dropped in our lap this week. Every person who arrived here for worship by car today encountered this. Did you see it when you came in? This was our beautiful new speed bump. Installed, painted with a bright, cheery yellow coat of paint not even 3 months ago. An exuberant sign of welcome to all who arrive here, inviting them quite literally to slow down. Until our efficient and hardworking snow plowing friend plowed the speed bump right on out of existence last week. 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. I can't help but marvel at the illustration this is for us of the relationship between our world and rest. The speed bump is the rest we all deserve and were intended to have. It is the slowing down that the world needs. It is the resistance against the fast pace of everything coming toward it. Take it easy, it invites us. And the world says, nah, and blows right over it, obliterating it in the process. This is what it often feels like when we really do try to rest. The speed and the needs of life just keep coming, barreling at us over and over, demanding more and more of us. And yet, if anything is ever going to change, we have to be the speed bump. We have to resist, even if it means getting rebuilt and repainted a few times. Resting is our resistance, not in the face of cars and traffic and snowplows headed our way, but against the lies we are told about our worth. Rest is resisting the narrative that we are made for output, and any time we spend not doing is time that is wasted. Rest is resistance because we get to say, for a moment, for an hour, for a day, no, 24/7 world, you do not get to have all of me. This bit of rest is gift from my Creator, and I'm going to enjoy it. Like a speed bump, we must insist, persist, resist, be the speed bump. The reality is the demands of the world are not going to change overnight. Our ability to resist them won't either. As I've said, these values of productivity and busyness and labor have shaped our world for several centuries now. We cannot all of a sudden, out of nowhere, craft a new world order that celebrates and values and encourages rest. We have to begin by learning to rest, even within the systems around us, in order to push back against them. And of course, that means we will probably get plowed over more than once until the snowplow route shifts to make accommodations for the bump. Resistance is a long game, but this is one worth playing. Tricia Hersey is an artist, theologian, community organizer, and author of the book titled Rest is Resistance. She founded what is now known as the NAP Ministry, and as a result, she's been dubbed by followers of her work the NAP Bishop. I highly recommend this particular book to you as you lean into practices of rest in this new year. But she writes about how the kind of rest that is resistance must be enacted in the midst of our current realities. She writes, our work, the NAP Ministry, is not about a one-day only event where leaving your homes is necessary to rest in a fancy retreat center or hotel. This work is about a slow unraveling that will require our participation for our entire lives. It is a cultural shift rooted in an embodiment lens. This means that we must actively practice, engage, and push back against the dominant culture. We must snatch and integrate rest in the quiet, loud, mundane, and full moments of our lives daily. It must be life-altering. And within our own communities, homes, workspaces, religious institutions, academic spaces, and most importantly, in our minds. She shares some of the ways that she began snatching rest in the midst of a grueling season of graduate school and full-time work and family. It started with 15-minute timed cat naps, both in the library on campus and at home before the evening chaos. She started sky gazing in between classes, sitting outside and looking at nothing but the sky. If she couldn't get outside, she would fixate on the leaves of a tree out the window. During studying or writing, she would stop to do breathing exercises that she had learned in childbirth classes. She audited a beginning ballet class to tend to her own interest and not the demands of school and work, and to get out of her head where she spent so much time and into her body. These were early examples of steps to change her own pattern and rhythm to resist the nonstop demands of her life at that point. And through them, she landed at a simple understanding of rest. Resting is about getting people back to their truest selves. Rest is anything that slows you down enough to allow your body and your mind to connect in the deepest way. Rest is so much more than sleep. And rest can be similar for all of us in some ways, but it can also be experienced uniquely by each one of us. Because rest is not simply achieving a vegetative or non-conscious state. It's not changing from one life-sucking task of labor to another life-sucking task of pseudo-leisure. It's entering into a time and a space that is restorative, that connects us back to ourselves and therefore opens those moments to God. It insists that this part of ourselves belongs to us, belongs to God, and no one else. The demands of the world must pause and wait for us. If we're looking for a model of this rest-snatching rhythm, we need look no farther than Jesus. Jesus did not live in a post-industrialist, capitalist world, but he was no stranger to the demands the world had of him. I mean, when you can turn water into wine, you know people are not going to let you rest. Beyond his vintner skills, Jesus was changing people's lives. He was saying things in ways they'd never heard before. He was healing their ailments, sharing meals with people who'd never even been invited to the party, challenging the status quo in a way that people were hungry to hear. It didn't take long for his Google Calendar to fill right up. And yet over and over again, we see Jesus withdrawing. We see this happen repeatedly through the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but Luke sums it all up. And he says it this way: after Jesus has healed a man of a skin disease, but right before he goes and heals the man who is paralyzed. In Luke chapter 5, he writes, "News of him," Jesus, "spread even more, and huge crowds gathered to listen and to be healed from their illnesses. But Jesus would withdraw to deserted places for prayer." The demands of the world press in, even on the Son of God. The rhythm of rest is encroached upon even for Jesus. Hundreds of people clamoring for his presence and his attention, but he manages to resist. He shows us that we must wrestle with this restoration, even out of the most meaningful demands on our time. Jesus withdraws to mountains. He escapes at night to quiet gardens. He disappears to be filled with the goodness of God. He takes naps in boats while storms rage all around. I've always wondered how that moment went down in Mark chapter 4, the moment that Jesus and his disciples are sailing across the Sea of Galilee. He's had a good, hard day of work, and so he hunkers down for a nap in the back of the boat. All the disciples have to do is be quiet and sail the boat. But a squall squalls, and the disciples freak out. These guys, a few of them, live on the water. They are fishermen. They should be better equipped than Jesus, who grew up in a craftsman home, to handle a storm on the water. But they decide to wake him up. I just wonder, how mad was Jesus? The man needed his rest. I feel like I know how mad he was. He was as irritated as I am when my kid wakes me up 5 minutes before my alarm's supposed to go off. Come on, just let me have these few precious moments of rest. All that to say, Jesus' frequent disappearance, his regular withdrawal to restore his soul, should signal to us God's fundamental desire for us to stop, to resist the world. Jesus resists the insatiable demands of the people on his time, his touch, his presence, his voice, and he does so with rest. They are longing for the gifts that he has come to offer, and he gives those gifts freely. But his rhythm of work and rest shows us that there are limits to how much of ourselves we allow the world to take. Because from the beginning, our time and our energy belongs first to God. No one is going to make this boundary for us. No one else is going to ensure that we stop and take rest. It's up to us. And when we stop, the world continues to swirl around us, but we resist its overwhelm. When we rest, whether it's hours or days of withdrawal from the pace of life, or whether it's snatching segments of breathing and walking and sky gazing in the midst of a busy day, we are giving ourselves back to God for restoration, for reminding that we are sufficient even when we do nothing at all. And in that rest, we are regenerated. We are returned from the demands of the world to ourselves. We reclaim our daydreams and our imagination, our creativity, and our ways of seeing through to a different way. A 24/7 world of profit and performance is afraid of rested people. It will snowplow as many speed bumps as it can, because people who know how to slow down, to rest, are people who can reimagine a different way to be. We become a threat to the status quo and a possibility for a transformed future. And that's where we'll end the series next week, with rest as transformation. But that imagination and that transformation will never happen if we don't practice rest as resistance. I will tell you, I think we are going to need this imagination. We need it because of what the world already throws at us: the pace of life that we have to maintain in a profit-hungry society, the inundation of stories and news and catastrophes, and the discernment required to see through biases, the constant pressure of social media that tears people down and traps us all in a world of comparison and inadequacy. And we will need this imagination for what is yet to come. Even tomorrow, we face a day of transition as a new administration comes into leadership in the United States. We will have to face and reckon with and wrest from unsettling rhetoric from our highest office and a dizzying pace of news and uncertainty. We do not know what is to come, Republican, Democrat, Independent. But it will likely not be restful. With ongoing news, violence, fear for the rights and safety of people we love, conflict. As with any political chapter, we, as people following Jesus, will need keen eyes to see, to name what is unloving, what is unjust. And we will need to act from our own conviction of loving God and loving our neighbor. We'll need imagination to do this when it becomes difficult. The practice of rest will be resistance, to know how much news and noise to take in and to have the initiative to pause often and tune out. The practice of rest will help us be knowledgeable about what is happening around us, but rested enough to respond with courage and clarity, and maybe one day to live into something new. In late autumn, as leaves turn colors and then begin to fall from their summertime branches, and what feels like the death of winter starts to set in, there is something that happens to the tree at the point where the branch has to let go of the leaf. This point of severance is called the abscission zone. And what happens here, as soon as the leaf falls, within a few hours, the tree has released substances to begin to heal over the scar, creating a small bump to protect itself during the winter from a loss of water, infection of parasites that might invade, and prepare the bud where the leaf will emerge once again in the spring. You can see it when you look at trees, even now. Catherine May writes about this process of abscission in her incredible book, Wintering, another one that I strongly recommend to you if you want to explore this theme of rest more deeply. It's a stunning book. But her description of trees as they enter into abscission in winter struck me as an apt metaphor for what is happening to us in the quiet and recovery of rest. We think we're looking at the skeleton of a tree in winter, a dead thing waiting to come back to life, but the tree is never dead. Instead, she writes, the tree is waiting. It has everything ready. Its fallen leaves are mulching the forest floor. Its roots are drawing up the extra winter moisture, providing a firm anchor against the season's storms. It is far from dead. It is, in fact, the life and the soul of the wood. It's just getting on with it quietly. It will not burst into life in the spring. It will just put on a new coat and face the world again. This is rest for us, the resistance of the harshness of the world, the quiet but active restoration within us that is creating something new so that we might emerge again taller, stronger, giving more shade and broader branches, changing the forest over the long, steady arc of time. No one is going to give rest to you. That's not how the world works. But God has already given it. It's yours to insist upon, to enjoy, yours to take and be made new. Rest is our resistance. Let's end together in a moment of rest. Maybe this is the only moment of quiet that you will get today. Quiet your mind, connect it to your body. Sense God's presence in and around you, and receive this gift of God's rest once again.